call the meeting to order at 5:35. Drew, will you provide our invocation, please?
Pray with me, please. Father God, we're always so grateful to come together in your presence, Lord. I ask that you help us all to serve our community. Lord, we just ask that you give us wisdom to know what to recommend to our council. And Father God, we just want to give you thanks for every good thing in our life and in our community. In the name of Jesus, amen.
Roll call, please.
Here.
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 Here. Our first item of business is consideration approval of the minutes from our planning commission meeting on May 26th, 2020.
I move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Call for a vote, please.
Aye.
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 Aye. Our second item of business is consideration of case PC 2020-10. It's the request the approval of rezoning property located near Highway 70 bypass and Cemetery Road. Ms. Barker?
Good evening. This was tabled from the last meeting, and the main thing that has changed was it was requested to have a map of the properties kind of divided out by the parcel and by the legal description. I had Aaron work on that, and he completed that. So you guys got a small version. I have a bigger version if you guys need to see that. And the applicant's also here. We did resend out notices as well. Staff has not received any letters or phone calls regarding the case. There was one other deal that the applicant was talking about doing, and I'll let him speak to this more so when the time is right. But there was a talk of taking off of, it would be this tract 1 up here, and dividing it in half and having it part of it doing the rezoning and then part of it not. The problem with that is if we treated it just this way with having it, it'd be a dual zone property. It's just kind of a bad planning practice to have that ability. So I recommended that they potentially look at doing some sort of subdivision process. But in doing that, it's going to be ultimately up to you guys what you guys want to do on that. But just letting you guys know where we're at with that.
If you would, is that all you have for us?
Yes.
Okay. If you would, that map you have, if you'll hold that bigger one up, can you tell us what these things are saying up here? Can you read that on your map?
There's tract 6. And
Which one is that?
It's this far closest to 3rd Street.
That's 6.
Mm-hmm. And then there's this little bitty piece that's tract 1 and then tract 2. And then the other one is tract 5 and then tract 4.
So this one though, this little piece
Mm-hmm.
in here is what I'm pointing.
Yep.
That can't be tract 1. We got tract 1 down here.
The way the legals are, it's probably a different block or something. Or it may just be, I don't know.
Well, I mean, like our tracks that we're looking at though, are we calling 2 different tracks, tract 1?
Right. This is tract 6 and then parentheses tract 1.
So 1 of 6.
Right.
Yeah, 1 of 6.
Yeah. That's how the warranty deeds were typed up.
Okay. Anything for Ms. Barker?
Were there any, I know you said you had not received any letters, but at the last meeting, there were some folks here that voiced opposition.
Yes,
But-
there were several people that voiced opposition and concern for rezoning in the area.
Okay. But no one has turned anything in. It's just
Not
those
in
people
this-
that attended the meeting.
No, not in this last go round.
And I think you mentioned this earlier, they were mailed notices for tonight's meeting.
Yes,
Okay.
they were. And they also had a copy of the maps, the same maps that you guys received as well.
Okay.
So.
All right. Would you like to speak to where we're at now?
Yes, absolutely.
All right.
Good evening, everyone. Brad Aycock, I'm a broker here in Durant representing Mr. Mullins and Mr. Yandell that are here. So just kind of want to generally, I know I've already kind of given you our spill, but we basically determined that the highest and best use of all of this land was for some type of industrial park. Some of the reasons we came to that conclusion, there's already industrial property out there. It is on the outskirts of the city limits. We do think this is maybe better than having to do some type of annexation in the future, or a flagpole annexation or something like that. Nearby, there are industrial properties, probably I-1 and I-2. I know for sure I-2 nearby. There's also on the corner of Cemetery and Rodeo Road, what we would consider an industrial business already operating there on the corner. Some type of trucking, freight hauling, and trucking repair business. I don't believe it is zoned as industrial, but it is being operated as an industrial business. There is already infrastructure in place on tracks 4, 5, and 6, and I may be able to clear this up for you guys. I should have made more copies of this maybe, but I thought you would have it all. So the 3 tracts of land north of the bypass from east to west are track 6, track 5, track 4. So track 6 is the one that has a single family home on it. There is also water, sewer, and electric already on the property. There is Durant sewer on that property. It was extended across Highway 78 Southeast 3rd for the industrial business that is down Country Club Road. South of the bypass, the furthest north properties, tract 1, tract 2, and then at the very bottom on the corner of Southeast 3rd and Rodeo, that's tract 7, and then tract 3, 10 acres directly to the west there. And as I said, we just basically determined that this was the highest and best use of the property. If it would have been in a commercial area, we probably would have tried to rezone it commercial. But just seeing as how there's already a lot of industrial land nearby, that's what we determined the highest and best use. I think a couple of people maybe touched on spot zoning last time. We really didn't think that would be the case, for one, because it is such a large tract of land. It's not a small tract inside of another zone. So we really didn't feel like it was spot zoning. So, we've already got infrastructure in place. We think it's a good spot for an industrial business. And, we hope you guys make a good recommendation.
So other than dividing into tracks, what has changed in your request from last time we were here?
No request. I mean, we're still asking for it all to be rezoned I-1.
On tracks 4, 5, and 6, do all those have water and sewer, or just 6?
So I am not 100% sure. I know that track 6 has both. Tracks 4 and 5 have water. I assume that there's a tie-in available on track 6. So I don't know why it wouldn't be a possibility to extend that westward and tie in right there at the corner. Just it makes sense. And actually, I think that there's already some slope west to east headed downhill towards that sewer.
Okay.
Is that, I tried to pull it up and look at it, but I can't get my phone to load quick enough. The big square tract that is to the east, wasn't that rezoned just a couple of years ago for a big neighborhood?
So I believe there's the one across.
Yeah, I'm talking about this one right here.
Yes. No, it's south of the bypass
Yeah.
and west of Cemetery Road.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, it would be west. I'm sorry.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
West.
Yeah, that's the 160 acres of rezone for R1.
Right.
Let me touch on one other thing that Danielle mentioned as well. Tract 1, what we're calling Tract 1. So that's the furthest north tract that is south of the bypass. The furthest west 30 acres. We have had the surveyor write up a new legal description for that 30 acres. And so what we're basically calling that is Tract 1.1. So there is a new legal description for Tract 1. It is the original legal description less and accept the legal description for Tract 1.1. So there is a good legal description that has already separated that 30 acres. The intention of Mr. Mullins for that 30 acres is to subdivide it into 6 5-acre tracts and sell that as A1 property. So they're not asking for it to be rezoned. And we do have a good, valid legal description for that.
Is there a deed filed with that legal description, or we just?
There's
have
not a
it?
deed filed with that legal description, but the deed for Tract 1 that you have is the entire legal
Includes it.
description. So I mean, it would just be a matter of filing it, I guess, if we needed to, but the legal description is accurate.
So as I understand, sorry,
Yeah.
as I understand it, that west portion is what you would like excluded from the rezoning.
Correct, yeah. Our plan is to have that subdivided, like I said, into 6 5-acre tracts. So then we won't have any need to request a rezoning for that. There are 2 5-acre tracts with about the same frontage just south of where those will be. They look almost identical to what these new 6 tracts will look like. And then all 6 of these will have frontage on Cemetery Road.
Any other questions? Okay. Whitney, do you have anything for Mr. Aycock?
Not for him, no.
Ms. Barker? Thank you.
Gonna note that, like I said, if you guys do kind of exclude that extra 30 acres, that technically that would still be considered dual zone property because it has not been subdivided through the city, and that would have to be done before that could be.
So is that a different request, an additional request?
It would be, yes, because they'd have to have it subdivided for the 6 acres, but it's still a part of Tract 1, and that's kind of what we're looking at this point. So it's a little gray,
Yeah.
I guess.
Okay. Mhm. Sure. Yeah.
So if we filed a warranty deed that just had that 30 acres as
Be able to file it because it's not subdivided. The county, when the county accepts a warranty deed, it has to be legally subdivided by the city if it's in city limits.
even if it's more than 10 acres.
I believe so.
I guess we'll just have to look at that because as I understood it, if it was more than 10 acres, I mean, are you saying they can't transfer that land?
They can probably transfer it, but city-wise, you're gonna have a dual zone property there. So by having a dual zone property, there's nothing illegal technically about it, but it's bad planning practice to have it to where you have 2 pieces of property or 1 piece of property zoned as two separately. Yeah, you're gonna subdivide the other piece of it, but it's still 1 piece of property, 1 legal. And in order to break that legal apart, you have to do a subdivision of it.
So, I mean, what we've done here, I mean, we've got 7 tracks. I mean, they split that up. Why was,
That was just that's the way the legals are, is saying that's different tracks.
so,
But this one is the way it is right now. It's 1 tract of land.
okay. So when we sent in the new legal description for Tract 1, that didn't take care of that
No.
because
Because
why?
it's not a subdivision process. All you're doing now is you have a new legal. But in order to get the property separated, you have to go through the subdivision process.
To separate 30 acres, you have to subdivide it. What's the minimum there?
There is no minimum. city ordinances require anything that's.
So originally tract 1, tract 2 were 130 something acres, and they split that up and bought and sold it. How is that different from what we're talking about here?
Could have been done before ordinances were placed. I don't know. I can't tell you what happened in the past. I have no clue.
That's just still a point of confusion for me, so.
Whitney, do you can you help us with that at all?
Not really. That's a little outside of my area of expertise. I think Danielle is right. You have to have more than just a separate legal description, but I agree with what Danielle said. But in terms of helping him get it done, not really.
Okay. Do either one of you gentlemen want to speak? Okay, if you would come up and give us your name, please.
Good evening. My name is Buddy Yandell. I'm one of the owners or my wife and I are owners, along with my brother-in-law and sister-in-law, of all of the tracts that are in question here. But anyway, looking at the big picture of it, we just felt like that the best use of the land, I'll reiterate what Brad said, it was industrial, because the city evidently is kind of going in that direction, and it's industrial in that area. Also, again, there is an industrial type business in existence at Rodeo Road and Cemetery Road. And our land is kind of sandwiched between the current industrial park that you have and that business. So that was part of our decision there too, knowing that there was already a business there on that corner being run as a trucking company, and also a trucking repair company also going on there too. But we're just merely trying to follow in the city's footsteps. They kind of laid the groundwork, we felt like, for industry out in that area, and with their current industrial park. So we're kind of following in their footsteps, and felt like industrial and industry 1 was our choice, of course, as being the most logical choice there. So, but I'll touch on some of the comments at the last meeting too, was about some of the railroad was brought up as a potential problem. Of course, the railroad has been abandoned for, we feel like, over 70 years. And the abandonment of the railroad, our understanding is the property reverts back to the property owner. And so we don't feel like that's a problem. And plus, as you know, the bypass went across that railroad right of way, and we don't feel like that would they would do that if there was a potential problem having a railroad right of way there. So anyway, I'm just following up on what Brad has already told you basically, and that we felt like that was the best use of the property. So that's really about all I can add.
Mr. Mullins, is there anything you can share in terms of intended use?
No, we have no intended use, and it's kind of, if you build it, they will come type thinking. I think I don't think the city knew what would come to their industrial park when they put it in. So we just kind of, if you build it, they will come type of thing.
Yeah.
So.
Is there, and I apologize, I missed last month's meeting, so I'm catching up on a little bit of what happened last month. Was there any discussion about access to these properties other than Rodeo Road and Third? And I'm sure you have been on Rodeo Road quite a bit, and it definitely would not hold up to industrial traffic in its current state. So was there any discussion about access into these properties at last month's meeting?
It was minimal.
Minimal?
Yeah.
In our mind, we felt like most of the access would come off of 78 or Southeast Third. Is it Southeast Third?
Mhm. Yes.
78.
Yeah.
Was our thinking that any potential industry would rather come in off of 78
Sure.
with access to the bypass and so forth.
Right.
Would be the most logical choice. So,
I think the concern that, as I remember, the concern was, we couldn't control or have say what they chose to have access from.
Correct, yeah. I think
So
you're-
although it might be envisioned that they would access it from 78, if we rezone, all tracks in total, they can access it from whichever street. Sure. So I think that was what was expressed as I remember.
Any other questions, comments? Discussion?
Again, I'm reaching back a couple of years here. And this may not come into play because I'm not sure it's part of the property, but the old country club, did that get turned into some sort of nature preserve, or there was some talk about that? They did not. Okay, all right. Never mind.
All right. Thank you.
okay, thank you.
Any discussion?
So, I mean, my concern is still kind of what it was at the last meeting. We've got two different interests going here. On one hand, I believe very firmly that an owner should be encouraged to do what they can do with their property, and this is a lot of property. Plus, I think that Mr. Yandell and Mr. Aycock are correct that in the future, I mean, the ideal use of this tract of land probably is industrial. But on the other hand, there's only one tiny spot of industrial land that's next to them, and that is that little quadrant north of the bypass that very little of the rest of the property connects to. And tracks 3 and 7 and the back of tract 1 are directly by what is residential property and what we've zoned in the past. I mean, we chose not that long ago to approve, I think, a fairly good subdivision in that area. So I'm concerned about that because big chunks of the tracks border on residential neighborhoods, and they're really, other than that one small quadrant, there isn't anything industrial there. So I'm a little conflicted because I would agree that ideally that's probably what that area should be in the future, but that's not what it is now, and that's not what's surrounding it. So that kind of causes me some concern about, we've got all these residences in the area and then approving this ginormous chunk in the middle to be industrial. That's just an issue for me.
I'd probably have to echo the same sentiment. I certainly want every landowner to be able to determine, how they want to use it. In the same breath with the R1, rezoning nearby, and the current use, along Cemetery Road is residential now. It would be hard for me to, vote in favor of rezoning that large of an acreage, all at one time. My personal view is I would much prefer to see, an interested buyer, a specific use for the land, so that, the community could have some insight to, who they would have as neighbors, and be able to get some buy-in on converting that to light industrial. So, but at this time, that large of a tract seems like a lot.
I agree with both of them on being able to do what you want to with your land. one of the challenges for me is, we're guided by our future land use map. I know we're in the process of updating that. So that's our guiding light on the way it should go. And currently, as of right now, it doesn't have this as industrial in the future. Also, another big no-no is our spot zoning. And I agree it's a big tract of land, but I think it's still inside. It's a spot that we're picking outside of a larger area. The other challenge I have is the way our ordinance is written is, so this industrial will butt up against ag in, I guess, all these areas. And our, it's not buffer zone, it's not facade, but it's the transition from, a transition is required from industrial to residential, or industrial, I believe even to commercial, but it's not required from industrial to ag. So there's not a mechanism in there of even thinking of, this is going to be up against ag, which is part of it's used as residential. The other part is the cemetery. So I don't know how that fits with no buffer and what that causes, just a change potentially. I mean, if it's a warehouse, it's facing the other direction, it's no big deal. If that's where they have their lay down yard in the back and they've, got forklifts and honking horns and loudspeakers. And I mean, so, just unknown. So, those are my challenges. And even the dual zoning, that's just tough. So those are my thoughts. Shane, you got anything?
I don't have anything outside of what everyone else has already said. But I do have concern about the buffer issue. And a little bit to what Drew was saying earlier that, I know we can't always have a plan, and you guys are looking to the best use of your land, but just kind of carte blanche turning something into industrial that's really kind of, jumping the highway, so to speak, and neighboring a lot of agriculture and neighboring a lot of residences. I'd hate to see that sort of blind industrial zoning and we end up with a giant concrete plant next to everybody's farm and houses or something something to that effect. So I do have an issue with kind of blindly rezoning it without some sort of plan considering the surrounding properties.
Just throwing out a reminder that we
Yes.
have those separate legals. So if there's a part of it that you guys feel, okay, that would work as an industrial, but maybe not the rest, that is a possibility. I know that was discussed at the last meeting as well, as maybe, like stuff that's north of the bypass versus south of the bypass and things like that. So just throwing a reminder out there for you guys to think about.
This is just my thought in that regard is that, again, I think my statement and comments would stand even if it were to be, a segmented piece off, because at that point we're setting a precedence, for all the other tracks to follow, without any additional cause. So my personal opinion, that doesn't change anything for me.
Anything further? Yep.
Touch on a couple of things. As far as the industrial land, budding, the ag land, we're kind of, I think there's not a need for a buffer zone because ag land inherently has a nuisance associated with it when it's used as it's supposed to be. You've got animals and livestock and poultry and feed lot. I mean, it's not a feed lot, obviously, but there is a nuisance associated with ag land. So that really wasn't as much of it, or we didn't think that was going to be as much of a concern. You touched on Rodeo Road. The last time we went by there, that trucking business that's there, they've got 5 or 6 18-wheelers parked in their lot. So if that road's not up to snuff at this point, it maybe should be addressed at some point because it's already going on there. And was another reason why we wanted to do that. We definitely understand everybody's concerns. And like we kind of touched on the track 1 and the track 1.1, that everything on Cemetery, we won't have any land south of the bypass that they're asking to be rezoned that would touch Cemetery Road. So there would be a road and a buffer of ag land between that residential subdivision that you guys approved and the industrial land.
Thank you.
Danielle, can I address a question to you? So the property that's been brought up several times that has the truck's parked on, and so despite what the use is, do you recall what zoning that is?
I don't.
It shows ag.
Let's see. Where is it at?
It shows ag on our deal here.
So if it's Cemetery Road, if it's to the south of Rodeo Road and Southeast Third, then that's considered ag. The only industrial is up on near Country Club Road and the bypass.
Well, this is on the corner of Cemetery Road and Rodeo Road.
Okay, that's all
Zone.
ag there.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
I remember too on Rodeo Road. I mean, we had folks out there wanting R3 a while back.
Right.
And I mean, it was just they didn't get it. I don't believe.
No,
I mean,
they
it
did
was,
not.
So that area has just got some peculiarities to it that can be tough. I agree with the project. If we had a project to look at, I think it'd be agreeable. On like with the traditional ag part, I'm still have some concern about the cemetery. It's in ag. And so, I don't know what that I don't know. So it's unknown for me that I don't like. So I'm open for more discussion or entertain a motion. I will reiterate before we go any further that whatever motion or vote tonight is a recommendation to the council, and it's not the final decision. So just want to make that clear.
I move to deny the request.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Call for a vote, please.
Aye.
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 Aye. Do we have any new business?
we do. Starting tomorrow or becoming effective tomorrow is the Regional Planning Commission. You guys probably have heard about it here and there, but that was approved by City Council a month or so ago. You guys will be getting an email about that further to kind of further discuss it, but we're going to be looking at dates to kind of get everybody together and throw out some ideas of kind of directional and let you guys know what's kind of the idea and where to go and things like that. So be looking for that.
How are we looking on the comprehensive plan for this, for like cases like we just heard that might have some changes in the future land use, and how's that looking?
It's still being worked on. We still have to get some more public comments. We want to have a joint meeting, but through with the COVID situation, we have to kind of, it's hard to have a joint meeting like that and social distance. So we're kind of waiting to see where that lands, but that's where we're at. For the joint meetings, we just can't have them to where they're going to be as productive as we'd like. So that's kind of where we're at.
Is this something we think we'll have this next quarter or by the end of the year, or?
Hopefully.
Okay.
I'm really hopeful. I've been working on bits and pieces as I can, but there's certain pieces we just can't do without the public comment.
So just to follow up on some old business, we had talked about reworking some of the language regarding mobile homes, manufactured homes and all that. So has it been due to COVID that we're also postponing the discussions with city manager?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes. He wanted to have where council and you guys could, like you guys requested, having a joint meeting with everybody there.
Well, I'm just on a personal note, I'm looking forward to having that discussion. You know, I think that's something that, you know, we need to decide as a group. And I certainly would, I feel the need to have their input, both city manager and council. So all for jumping in and changing language, but I want to make sure I know,
Right.
what our motives are.
Yes. Yep.
To do that. So just want to follow up.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks. Yep.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Hi.